I call the April the 25th, 2022 meeting of the Ways and Means Committee back to order, and we'll pick up where we left off. And that would be with Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So when we met last, Chair Mariani, we were talking about priorities, and you had talked about, when I asked you about the bomb squad deficiency request from the State Fire Marshal, that it just wasn't as high of a priority as some of the other things. And I was about to ask you, before we adjourned, or recessed, I should say, specifically about the BCA's request. They had $9.7 million, which in speaking with Superintendent Evans, it was about 44 new forensic scientists because we've got rampant violent crime happening across the state. And that would really help process all of that evidence. And instead we put in 1.5 million, which in my math is about 8 scientists. But I was just wondering if maybe the superintendent could just let us know quickly, how far would 1.5 million go when the ask was 9.7, what they will do and what they are not able to do in relation to violent crime.
Representative O'Neill, that's the superintendent. You would like to respond to that? Do we have? Good afternoon. Welcome to the Ways and Means Committee. Please introduce yourself and proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. My name is Drew Evans. I'm the superintendent at the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. Thank you, Representative O'Neill. I heard the question. You know, we would really need to evaluate what it is. For the committee's knowledge, the ask out of the governor's budget is a 3-part component. It deals with forensics and our forensic laboratory support for that work, analytics, doing criminal intelligence analyst work with the civilian criminal intelligence analysts to analyze crime, support cases, et cetera. And then a component would be a violent crime team that would focus on shootings, homicides, carjackings, et cetera, that were licensed personnel. As contemplated and funded in the budget right now, as you note, Representative O'Neill, there's a portion of that funding that's been asked by the committee to focus on analytics and forensics. And I think your number that you quoted this morning would be fairly close, maybe a little bit higher, from probably 10 to 15 personnel we would need to examine, because it's a number amount. We'd really have to figure out what that looks like in terms of equipment, personnel, and then staffing going forward.
Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Superintendent Evans. We're always here to help solve crimes, and we really appreciate your work. So thank you for that, and hopefully that number can go up a little bit. We can shift some priorities. So Chair Mariani, when I was looking at the bulk of the bill, what confused me is starting on page 80, you've got local investigation grants. And what confused me is not so much the beginning of that section, but when we get to page 82, line 29, and these are the different uses of the money. And in here, number .4 says acquiring, upgrading, replacing investigative or evidence processing technology or equipment, hiring additional evidence processing personnel, ensuring personal responsibility for evidence processing, and so on. And it confuses me because, as the BCA superintendent just stated, that is exactly what they do. And yet this money is going out to local units of government. And I do, you know, I'm aware that we have a couple counties, we have 4 counties that I know of that have their own lab. Hennepin County has their own lab. There is a kind of a coalition of Okanoka, Wright, and Sherburne that has the Midwest Regional Forensics Lab. So, Chair Mariani, was it your intention to support these labs that are not state labs but county labs through this work, through this portion on page 82.29?
Chair Mariani.
Madam Chair and Representative O'Neill, members, so 2 things really quick just to back up. I'll answer that question, but just to back up to the prior observation, frankly, I don't think the other body does anything in terms of investing in the analytics, forensics, and violent crime work. So this is going to be a really important conversation, assuming this bill survives and we have that interaction and we continue to learn and we decide, how much of that we would do. The expression here is that we were convinced, I was convinced, that we have to do something. And this is actually related then to your immediate question before us. I don't think the state has ever, or should it ever assume that it is its sole responsibility to do every aspect of law enforcement work. I think our tradition here has been that that's primarily a local function, and the role of the state then is to play an assistive partnership with our locals in many different aspects of law enforcement. Obviously, depending on how big the property tax base, how many people there are in a particular local jurisdiction, the ability to have sophisticated lab and forensics work is challenging. I think that's an appropriate place for the state to step in. So I think what we're looking for here is what is the right balance for that, but I don't think the answer to that goes to the eligibility of these funds. I don't think the answer to that is that no, locals, don't do any of that work, and we won't play a part in a role in doing that. Where the right balance of that, I think, is going to be a really good subjective, question and analysis for us and for locals, which is why we have this innovation board over at that we're creating at the office, at DPS Office of Justice Programs, to be able to do that really thoughtful database thinking, so that we can help answer questions about effectiveness and capacity issues, et cetera. But I think the bottom line here is that the intention of this language is for the state to play a partnering role in helping to build capacity for precisely those kind of activities, especially in those counties and those localities that are experiencing big upward trends in crime, and particularly those that have minimal local resources to do that for themselves.
Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Okay, so I think the bill as written absolutely gives money to counties to do their own labs, which is an interesting choice because we are grossly underfunding what the BCA actually needs to do to solve crimes. And, I'm not going to go into detail what they do because it's pretty intense, but they certainly are a huge player in solving crimes in the state of Minnesota. I think most law enforcement agencies, I'm not going to say all because some have their own crime labs, but many of them use them to solve really horrendous crimes. And we are talking about $15 million in the current biennium and $20 million ongoing in the tail. So it's a significant amount of money, much more than what was even the ask from the BCA just now. Moving on, that actually, there is another question in that section that doesn't really make sense to me. And I know we have Kate Weeks here from OJP, but I'm not really sure why you have OJP reviewing those expenditures of those grants, as most of them have to do with really what's in the realm I would see as DPS. But I don't know. That just seems like a kind of a misstep there. But in any case, let me go back to something else really quickly. You had mentioned the VAWA funding, the federal VAWA funding, and that you're using this money to kind of fill in. Right now, and you had said that under the Trump administration, the VAWA funding was cut. Well, Trump isn't there anymore, and Democrats control the whole kit and caboodle there. So if they wanted to backfill VAWA, they certainly could do that. And I don't know, it's not our place to, ask them to do that or not, but I got to think that if that's a priority for Democrats, that they would do that. Next thing I would say also is that it's really important to know for the body cameras, we had testimony from the corrections officers from AFSCME, and the corrections officers, so those that are working in precarious situations in our prisons, they are adamantly opposed to having body cameras. Now, I'm not going to go into the reasons why, but I just think that should be noted that that expenditure is something that's actually opposed by the people that we're trying to help. I know you had mentioned that sometimes we had to push people in that direction. I don't know that you really meant the corrections officers. I think you meant more of the law enforcement that are on the streets, but I think that should be noted that that $1.5 million for them, they don't even want it. One thing that's really good in this is the county probations reform, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that because, and Representative Novotny's not on the committee, but that is some really good reform. I think we spent 5 minutes on it in committee at the very end because we were so rushed. But I wanted to, take a moment just to say how incredibly important that work is and that it was a bipartisan work and it was some really good reforms. Because, again, here in Minnesota, we have a very low incarceration rate. We've been as low as third in the nation, lowest incarceration. So we have, 7,500-ish on a given day incarcerated. We have over 100,000 on probation. So we really need to fund probations more fully because that's really where the bulk of people are. So I do appreciate that work tremendously. I only have one other quick question. Let's see here. Believe it or not, Chair, I'm almost done.
I haven't gotten to 95 yet. So.
The rest we'll just save for the floor, right?
No doubt.
It's back in the bulk of where we're spending the money. So, we've got out of the $200 million that we're spending in this biennium and over $300 million in the tails, 110 of that is for the community grants. And as I was trying to process the 5 different grant areas, we already talked a little bit about the last grant area, the local investigative grants. There just seems to be a disconnect. In one place you say, let me see if I can find it here. Oh yeah, the restorative justice part. So on line 74.4 under local community innovation grants, which again is the bulk of the bulk. So that's 55 million in this fiscal and 60 million in the tails. You have a restorative justice program model. And since so much of the money is going to that area, we haven't talked much about that. Can you just briefly, there's a statutory reference which I did read and it was very, very broad. And I'm wondering if maybe you could give us what you had intended, and that is a very kind of a poignant part of that piece of legislation.
Yeah, thank you. I'd be delighted. It's more than poignant. It's actually pretty powerful work that offers an ability for when harm does happen, for there to be, obviously, we as a system, we're going to hold people accountable. There's ways to do that, with our entire, incarceration, corrections, even paying folks back for harm monetarily. But part of that is also, in the reference, to the restorative justice statute, which is actually pretty succinct, is based on really good evidence-based practices that you'll see not only in corrections, but also in other aspects of our society's work, like say, we're students, in our K-12 systems, are creating some harm with their classmates and, creating opportunities for them to come together in small communities to apologize, to empathize, to discover ways in which we can correct the harm, that's been done. If you talk to a number of folks who have been victimized by crime, they have lots of needs, including the need to have that psychological, spiritual even damage that's been done, to be able to have an engagement with all who participated in that so that they can bring closure to that. It's so powerful, to be able to have someone who's done you harm, say, hey, listen, I'm not that person no more, that was wrong, that's not on you, you did nothing to deserve that, that was all on me. There's incredibly powerful dynamics that flow out of that. And so that's the expectation. And in terms of the distribution of these funds, that's only one possibility. What we're doing, as I said earlier, is that we're trusting our locals to be, whether it's our cities or counties, towns, townships, tribal governments, to be able to design and pick and choose from all sorts of interventions, preventions, accountability, relative to their reality, their local geographic reality. So we're putting a lot of trust there, and we're saying, look, among the list of things that the state recognizes is, valid and powerful are these restorative based practices, and then there's many others as well.
Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That was an interesting, I'm glad I read the statute ahead of time, so I followed all that. But it's a different way to approach. We had talked about being innovative and thinking outside the box, and that certainly is that. So you had talked in just what you just said there about also what the importance of restoration, moving forward, healing. I think you mentioned even training people to do other things. And one concern I have in this bill related to that is the $7 million that we're taking from MNCOR, and I'd mentioned this in public safety. But the $7 million is literally the fund balance of MNCOR, which is in our prison systems, and it helps inmates learn trade skills, and they're actually involved in the economy because they're producing a product and it's being sold, and that's how they have revenue. So it's a revenue generating part of the prison system. And yet we're literally jeopardizing that great opportunity for them to learn job skills by taking the whole $7 million, which is the fund balance from MNCOR. So again, I would implore you to look at that, and as you move forward in negotiations, that you restore that funding, because I think it's really important to the key things that we want people to do, which is to learn a new skill and a trade. And that taking that money literally jeopardizes that. So I have great concerns about that. Just overall, the 110 million out of the 200 million is for grants that go to local entities. And like in this section, it says local responder grants. Half of the money cannot go to, or it says cannot involve law enforcement. But then later it says to qualify, you have to partner with law enforcement. So there's just disconnects through this language that I don't quite understand. I'm also concerned about once this $110 million just in this fiscal goes out, and it goes through cities and counties and some local law enforcement to other entities that are not them, whether it's a nonprofit or some other community organization, that the money just kind of gets lost and we're not quite sure what's happened to it. So I think we need to be really careful in tracking the money and watching where it goes and what kind of product that we're getting back and what kind of responses and what kind of changes we're seeing, that we're looking for. So those are some of my big concerns. There's also State Patrol had asked for replacement of things like their helicopters to be able to safely track carjacked victims or the carjacker, or other high-speed things where they can pull off and watch them go. And we're not replacing those helicopters. We're not replacing airplanes. We're not replacing the money that's the deficiency budget for the bomb squad. We're not helping further with use of force training. There's a lot of things that we're not doing, and I have concerns about what we are. So thank you, Madam Chair, for giving me this extra time at the end to express my concerns, and we'll take the rest of it to the floor. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Well, thank
Madam
you,
Chair, just really,
Chair Mariani.
very briefly, just want to make sure that, we're correctly understanding the bill. The funds that you're referring to are going to go to local cities, towns, townships, tribal government counties. So it's not picking law enforcement from community groups or whatever. How it goes from there will be decided by our local elected officials. You make excellent points about tracking the effectiveness of this work. That's built into the policy side of this with the creation of the Innovation Board, Department of Public Safety and OJP, and then the creation of the Statistical Analysis Center at OJP. The language in terms of how it goes, it doesn't say can't be law enforcement. It says not only law enforcement. There are going to be activities that are quite effective that locals may decide doesn't need to go through our local police department. Maybe it needs to go through, other local entities that may have relationships with our police departments. And then finally, on the State Patrol, we don't have, as you know, we don't have, oversight over that budget. I think Chair Hornstein is wrestling with the helicopter issue over in his end of the woods. I've suggested to him maybe they ought to be looking at drones, as possible ways to. But then, that gets me into, your colleague to the right there, because we had all sorts of conversations with Representative Scott a few years ago when we had another judiciary chair over drones, and oh my God, it raises a whole bunch of issues. But yeah, we don't have, we don't have the accounts for the State Patrol in that regard.
Well, thank you. Representative O'Neill, I must say I am very impressed with you going through that document and underlining and highlighting.
Oh, she's good.
Your real questions. Yeah, appreciate that. So I don't see any further questions, Chair Mariani. You have any closing statements?
Members, I really would appreciate your support on this. There is a kind of a historic opportunity here. We've heard that with some of the other bills relative to taking only a portion of our bounty as a state to make some really important investments. I can't think of very many things much more important than investing in strengthening our public safety corrections systems in our state. We're hearing that loud and clear, I believe, from regular Minnesotans. There are powerful, good ways in which we can do that that are structured here. We listen very carefully to a diversity of voices, everything from, those who've been victimized by crime, youth advocates, law enforcement officials themselves. We didn't take everything that they recommended, but we listened carefully and we put that together. And again, we put it together not just in throwing stuff up at the wall, just spending a ton of money. We did it in a really smart framework that can drive us to be better at what we do, whether it's in corrections, interventions, prevention, and even conventional law enforcement work. There's a lot of money here for law enforcement, a lot of money here for communities. It really merits a strong voice from us to all of those professionals and communities that we believe in them. We believe in them enough to make some major investments, and we believe in them enough to make sure that they're being properly guided and encouraged to pursue the best effective practices that are out there. And so with that, Madam Chair, I'll cease my comments, and I think you probably have some motions in terms of putting together two bills.
Well, thank you, Chair Mariani, for your work on this, your committee holistic and thoughtful approach to community public safety that balance funding, law enforcement, and community. So there being no further discussion, we will proceed with the motion to combine these two bills and send them to the floor using House File 4608 as the vehicle. So Chair Mariani, would you like to move that the language contained in House File 4608 as amended be incorporated into the Judiciary, Finance, Civic Law, and Public Safety Omnibus as separate articles?
I would so move, Madam Chair.
So the Mariani motion is before us. This will be a voice vote. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. No. The motion prevails. Next, Chair Becker-Finn, would you like to move that the language contained in House File 3920 as amended be incorporated into the Judiciary, Civic Law, and Public Safety Omnibus as a separate article?
Yes, Madam Chair, that is my motion.
Okay. So the Becker-Finn motion is before us. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay.
No.
The motion prevails. So House File 4608 as amended is before us. The next vote would be the final vote on the combined package. Chair Mariani renews his original motion that House File 4608, as amended, be recommended for placement on the general register, and that nonpartisan staff be directed to make any technical corrections and amend the title. Okay, so, Ms. Anna, can you please take the roll?
Chair Moran.
Aye.
Chair Moran, aye. Vice Chair Olson.
Aye.
Olson, aye. Representative Garofalo, excused. Representative O'Neill.
No.
O'Neill, no. Representative Albright.
No.
Albright, no. Representative Becker-Finn.
Aye.
Becker-Finn, aye. Representative Bernardi.
Aye.
Bernardi, aye. Representative Eklund.
Aye.
Eklund, aye. Representative Hansen.
Aye.
Hansen, aye. Representative Hassan.
Hassan, aye.
Hassan, aye. Representative Hertas.
Hurtas, no.
Hertas, no. Representative Hornstein.
Ornstein, aye.
Hornstein, aye. Representative Johnson.
Johnson, no.
Johnson, no. Representative Kresha.
Kresha, no.
Kresha, no. Representative Liebling.
Aye.
Liebling, aye. Representative Lilly.
Lily, aye.
Lilly, aye. Representative Mariani.
Mariani, aye.
Mariani, aye. Representative Marcourt.
Aye.
Marcourt, aye. Representative Miller.
No.
Miller, no. Representative Nash. Representative Nelson.
Aye.
Nelson, aye. Representative Noor.
Noor, aye.
Noor, aye. Representative O'Neill.
You're got me.
Oh, sorry. Excuse me. Representative O'Neill, no. Representative Pulaski.
Pulaski, aye.
Pulaski, aye. Representative Petersburg.
No.
Petersburg, no. Representative Pinto.
Aye.
Pinto, aye. Representative Schumacher.
Schumacher, no.
Schumacher, no. Representative Schultz.
Schultz, aye.
Schultz, aye. Representative Scott.
Scott, no.
Scott, no. Representative Sundin.
Sundin, aye.
Sundin, aye. And Representative Nash. Madam Chair, that is 18 ayes and 9 nays.
There have been 18 ayes and 9 nays. The motion prevails. House File 4608, as amended, is recommended for placement on the general register, and nonpartisan staff are directed to make any technical corrections and amend the title. I want to thank you to all the chairs today and for your committees for putting together this important work. It is really, really important work. Members, that completes our work for today. I want to thank you all for hanging in here, coming back, so that we can complete today's work. Our meeting tomorrow is scheduled to start at 9 o'clock. My office has been consulting with the Republicans to check in if we need to bump the time up to 8:30 to get some additional time in. We will let you know this afternoon if the time changes. Please put anything that you want to say for the meeting materials back into your committee folder, and you can leave that here. Anything else left on the table will be recycled. The meeting is adjourned.